Just like many political systems, chainsets on road bikes come in two basic flavours, standard and compact. But what exactly does this mean? How is a standard worse or better than a compact, and how can one or the other help your cycling? Many people, especially those new to cycling, simply buy their bikes and aren't really aware of some of the choices available to them. In this day and age of endlessly researching stuff online before we make a purchase, a typical bike review might talk about things like frame, comfort and stiffness, but it will rarely mention if a bike comes supplied with a standard or compact chainset. And even if it does, there are those for whom these two terms mean very little. To give you some idea of how important this is, for me, being a somewhat heavier rider, this is actually one of the first things I ask. If you look at your bike, you will see that there are cogs everywhere. A typical road bike will have two fairly large ones at the front and a collection of smaller ones on the back wheel, ranging from 9 on an older bike up to 12 on newer models. And as everyone knows, these are the gears and they help you to ride. A real techie term with gearing is rollout, which is just another way of measuring how far your bike will travel for one complete revolution of the front chainrings. For instance, when you're in a low gear, one pedal revolution might mean that your bike will only travel 3 meters, whereas that exact same pedal revolution might result in your bike traveling 10 meters in a higher gear. The factor that determines whether you're in a low gear or a high gear is the combination of front and rear cogs that the bike chain is currently running over. So the larger the ring at the front and the smaller the ring at the back, the higher the gear and the further the rollout. Changing to either a smaller ring on the front and or a larger ring on the back will mean a lower gear and a shorter rollout. Now of course other factors such as effort and terrain all come into play, but at its most basic, if your bike is travelling further for the same number of pedal revolutions, and assuming that you're using the same cadence or number of pedal revolutions per minute, this will usually mean that you will be moving faster the higher the gear you're in. All pretty obvious stuff so far. So what actually is a standard or compact chainset? Well, if you look at your front chainring, it should have two numbers corresponding to the number of teeth on each of the two chainrings. If it says 5339, that would be a standard, and anything smaller, so a 5034 for example, would be considered a compact chainset. Now these smaller numbers will straight away mean that pedalling will be a bit easier, but gearing is relative, so simply having smaller front chainrings might not necessarily mean that you also have lower gears. For this to be complete, you need to take into account the number of teeth on the rear cassette. These will be marked on each individual cog, but most bikes will have something like an 1128. On my Cannondale, it's 1132. Without going too deep into the mathematics of gear ratios, it's possible to use different combinations of small cogs on the back and large cogs on the front, and it will result in roughly the same rollout distance regardless of whether you have a standard or compact chainset. The real benefit of having one or the other only comes when you start to reach the limit of your gears. As I said earlier, I'm a heavier rider, and for me, climbing is always going to be much harder than for a lighter rider with similar power. Put very simply, if I was on a climb that was so steep I was forced to use my lowest gear, Having a compact chain set with its smaller chainring on the front would mean that I would be in a much lower gear than someone riding a standard chain set in their lower gear, assuming of course that their rear cassette was the same as mine. Similarly, if I was a fairly strong rider, able to turn the pedals over at a constant 90 revs per minute in my highest gear on a flat road with a standard chain set, this would result in a much higher speed than another rider also pedaling at 90 revs per minute on the same piece of road with a compact chain set. So the big question is, which one is going to be the best chain set for you? Well, you need to have a bit of a think about where your weaknesses and strengths lie. If, like me, you find climbing difficult and slow, or if you live in a particularly hilly area, I would suggest going for a compact. Alternatively, if you're fairly light or strong or a sprinter and need high speed, go for a standard. When you buy a new bike, always make a point of looking at the front chain rings to establish if it comes equipped with a standard or compact chain set. If it comes with one and you feel you need the other, an upgrade is quick and easy, and in some cases might not even affect the final purchase price of the bike. If, however, you're looking at the bikes you already have and need to change, you can simply upgrade the front chain rings, or depending on your setup, change the cassette on the rear wheel. So hopefully that is one of cycling's little mysteries cleared up. If you found this film useful, please like and share, and if you'd like to get the most out of your cycling, please consider subscribing for my regular weekly uploads. Thanks for watching.